Captain Hyun-soo stood on the bridge of the New Seoul, watching the stars through the thick glass windows. His ship was small compared to the massive cargo vessels that carried supplies between Earth's colonies, but it was the fastest exploration ship humans had ever built. The crew had been traveling for 6 months, pushing deeper into space than any human had gone before. "Captain, we're getting some strange readings," said Yoonji from her station. She was the ship's communications officer, a young woman who could speak 5 languages and understood computer codes better than anyone else on the ship. Her fingers moved quickly over the control panel as numbers and graphs appeared on her screen. Hyun-soo walked over to look at the data. "What kind of readings?" "Energy signatures. Very powerful ones, and they're moving toward us fast." Yoonji's voice carried worry. She had never seen anything like this before. Bora, the chief engineer, looked up from her workstation. She was a tough woman who had spent years fixing broken engines and keeping ships running in deep space. "Captain, whatever that is, it's using technology we don't understand. The energy output is massive." Taemin, the weapons specialist, checked his instruments. He was responsible for the ship's defense systems, though their weapons were simple compared to what military ships carried. "Should I power up our guns, Captain?" "Not yet," Hyun-soo said. "We came here to explore and learn, not to fight. Let's see what we're dealing with first." The answer came quickly. 3 enormous ships appeared in front of them, each one 10 times larger than the New Seoul. They were beautiful in a strange way, made from what looked like crystal that glowed with inner light. The ships moved without making any sound, floating through space like ghosts. "Captain, they're trying to talk to us," Yoonji said. She put the message on the main speakers. The voice that came through was deep and cold, speaking in a language none of them had ever heard. "I'm running it through our translation computer," Yoonji said quickly. After a few moments, the alien words started to make sense. "Small creatures in the metal box," the voice said, and there was laughter in it that made Hyun-soo's skin crawl. "You will stop your tiny ship and prepare to be examined. This is Captain Hyun-soo of the human exploration vessel New Seoul," Hyun-soo replied. "We come in peace. We're explorers from Earth, seeking to meet other intelligent life." More laughter came through the speakers. "Humans, how amusing. We are the Velkari, rulers of this galaxy for 10,000 years. You will surrender now or we will take your ship by force." Hyun-soo looked at his crew. Bora was already checking the engines, ready to run if needed. Taemin had his hand on the weapons controls. Hyunji was recording everything, knowing that this information might be important later. "We don't want any trouble," Hyun-soo said. "We can leave this area if you want us to." "Too late for that, little human," the Velkari voice said. "You have entered our space without permission. You must be punished." Before anyone could react, the New Seoul was caught in some kind of energy beam. The ship couldn't move, couldn't run, couldn't fight back. The Velkari ships pulled them in like a fish on a hook. "They're bringing us aboard the big ship," Bora said, watching her instruments. "There's nothing I can do to stop it." Minutes later, they found themselves in a huge metal room inside the Velkari ship. The air was strange, too thick and too warm. When the Velkari came to meet them, Hyun-soo understood why they had laughed. The aliens were giants, nearly 8 feet tall, with skin that looked like living crystal. They moved with the confidence of beings who had never met anything stronger than themselves. Their leader wore clothes made of metal that seemed to flow like water. "I am Commander Thelvaros," the alien said, looking down at the humans like they were insects. "You are the first humans we have seen." "How disappointing. We expected something more impressive." The commander walked around them, examining them like specimens in a laboratory. "Your ship is primitive. Chemical rockets? Metal projectile weapons? How do you even survive in space with such crude technology?" Thelvaros picked up one of their communication devices and crushed it easily in his hand. "We have weapons that can destroy stars. We have ships that travel between galaxies. We have conquered 1,000 worlds. And you? You have this tiny metal box and dreams of exploration." "We're a young species," Hyun-soo said, trying to keep his voice calm. "We've only been in space for a short time." "We're still learning." "Learning," the commander repeated and laughed again. "Yes, you will learn. We have decided that your species shows promise. Not as equals, of course. You could never be our equals. But as servants, as test subjects for our new biological weapons, you might be useful." The humans looked at each other with growing horror. Test subjects for weapons. The Velkari were talking about using their entire species as laboratory animals. "We will give you a gift. Thelvaros continued. 1 year. You will return to your homeworld and tell your leaders what you have learned here. Tell them that the Velkari Empire has found them. Tell them to prepare their people for integration into our civilization. Integration? Hyunji asked. Slavery, the commander said simply, but a comfortable slavery. We are not cruel without reason. Those who serve well will live good lives. Those who resist will die quickly. It is a simple choice. The Velkari began walking back toward the exit. 1 year, humans. Use it to say goodbye to your freedom. When we return, we will harvest your world and your people. Consider it an honor. Few species get to serve the Velkari. Just before they left, Thelvaros turned back to them. Do not think of running or hiding. We know where your Earth is now. There is nowhere in this galaxy you can go that we cannot find you. Accept your fate with dignity. The humans were returned to their ship and released. As the Velkari vessels disappeared into the darkness of space, Hyunsu and his crew sat in stunned silence. They had gone looking for new friends among the stars. Instead, they had found masters who saw them as nothing more than animals to be used and thrown away. Captain, Yunji said quietly, I recorded everything. Every word, every piece of technology I could scan, every detail about their ships. Good, Hyunsu replied. We need to get home as fast as possible. Earth needs to know what's coming. As the new soul began its long journey back to Earth, none of them knew that their meeting with the Velkari would change everything. The aliens had made one critical mistake. They had assumed that humans would react like every other species they had conquered, with fear, despair, and eventual surrender. They had never met a species that became more dangerous when cornered. The emergency meeting room in Geneva was packed with the most important people on Earth. President Sunja sat at the head of the long table, her face serious as she listened to Captain Hyun-soo tell his story for the 3rd time that day. Around the table sat generals, scientists, and world leaders who had flown in from every corner of the planet. So they gave us 1 year, General Dong-hyun said when Hyun-soo finished. He was a tough old soldier who had fought in 3 wars, but his voice shook slightly. 1 year to prepare for invasion by beings who can destroy stars. That's correct, General, Hyun-soo replied. He looked tired. The trip back to Earth had taken 4 months, leaving them only 8 months to prepare for something that seemed impossible to fight. Dr. Hai-wan, Earth's top physicist, studied the data that Eunji had collected. She was a small woman with thick glasses, but her mind was one of the sharpest on the planet. These energy readings are incredible, she said. But there's something interesting here. Everyone turned to look at her. Any hope, no matter how small, was worth hearing. Their technology is very advanced, Dr. Hai-wan continued, but it's also very specialized. Look at these shield patterns. They're designed to stop energy weapons, plasma beams, laser attacks, but I don't see any protection against simple kinetic energy. Kinetic energy? President Sunja asked. Things that hit them, Colonel Jinwoo explained. He was a military strategist known for thinking in ways that surprised his enemies. Bullets, missiles, anything physical moving fast enough. Dr. Hai-wan nodded. Exactly. It's like they've been fighting the same kinds of enemies for so long, they've forgotten about other possibilities. Bora, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. There's something else. When they captured our ship, I got a look at their engine systems. They use something called quantum tunneling to travel faster than light. What does that mean for us? General Dong-hyun asked. It means their ships have to create holes in space to jump from place to place, Bora explained. And if you know how those holes work, you might be able to predict where they'll appear, maybe even stop them from forming. For the first time since the meeting began, President Sunja smiled. It sounds like you're telling us we have a chance. A small one, Dr. Hai-wan admitted. But yes, I think we do. The next few months were the most intense in human history. Every factory on Earth was converted to build weapons and ships. Every scientist worked on understanding Velkari technology. Every soldier trained for a kind of war that had never been fought before. Dr. Hai-wan led a team that worked day and night to build weapons that could penetrate Velkari shields. They developed railguns that could fire metal projectiles at incredible speeds. They created missiles that moved so fast they were almost impossible to see. Bora worked with the best engineers from every country to reverse engineer the Velkari's faster-than-light travel. It took months, but slowly they began to understand how it worked. More importantly, they figured out how to detect when a quantum tunnel was about to open, and how to collapse it before ships could come through. Colonel Jinwoo studied every piece of information they had about Velkari society. He learned that they were ruled by strict hierarchies, with each level following orders from the level above. If we can cut off their command structure, he told the military leaders, their soldiers won't know what to do. Taemin worked with weapons experts to design new kinds of guns and missiles that combined human and Velkari technology. They called them rail plasma weapons, and they could fire superheated metal at near light speed. But the biggest change was in space itself. Humans had always been slow to expand beyond Earth, but now they had no choice. Hidden bases were built on the Moon, on Mars, in the asteroid belt, and on the moons of Jupiter. Each base was designed to be invisible to Velkari sensors and to strike without warning. Yoonji, now working as an intelligence officer, spent her time learning everything possible about how the Velkari thought. She studied their language, their culture, their psychology. She learned that they had been the dominant species for so long that they couldn't imagine being defeated. That's their weakness, she told President Sunja during one of their meetings. They've never had to adapt because they've never faced a real challenge. They think the same way they've thought for thousands of years. As the months passed, Earth transformed. Cities that had been centers of art and culture became military production facilities. Universities that had taught literature and history now focused on weapons design and alien psychology. Children who had dreamed of becoming teachers or doctors now trained to be soldiers and engineers. The work was exhausting and dangerous. Several research facilities exploded when experiments went wrong. Hundreds of workers died in construction accidents as bases were built too quickly in hostile environments. But no one complained. Everyone understood what would happen if they failed. 3 months before the deadline, they had their first major breakthrough. Dr. Hai Wan's team successfully tested a quantum tunnel disruptor. When activated, it could prevent Velkari ships from using their faster-than-light travel within a large area of space. We can trap them, she announced to the Defense Council. If we can get them to come into our solar system, we can cut off their escape route. 2 months before the deadline, Bora's engineering teams completed the first human ships with faster-than-light capability. They were smaller and faster than Velkari vessels, designed for hit-and-run attacks rather than direct confrontation. 1 month before the deadline, Colonel Jinwoo finished training the first units of space guerrilla fighters. They were soldiers who could operate in zero gravity, who could hide in asteroid fields for weeks, who could strike at enemy ships and disappear before anyone knew they were there. With just days left before the year was up, President Sunja held a final meeting with all the project leaders. The conference room looked very different than it had a year ago. The people in it looked different too, harder and more determined. Are we ready? She asked. Hyun-soo, now commanding the first human stealth ship, nodded. Our ships are in position throughout the solar system. We've got bases they don't know about and weapons they've never seen. Bora checked her reports. The quantum disruptors are online. The moment they enter our space, we can trap them here. Dr. Haiwan looked at her calculations one more time. Our weapons will work. I'm sure of that now. Colonel Jinwoo was confident. Our people are ready. They know what to do. Yoonji had the most important job of all. I've analyzed their command structure. I know which ships to target first. President Sunja looked around the room at these people who had worked miracles in less than a year. Then we wait, she said. And when they come expecting to find frightened primitives, we show them what humans do when someone threatens their home. Outside, the preparations were complete. Hidden throughout the solar system, human forces waited in silence. Weapons that hadn't existed a year ago were powered up and ready. Soldiers who had learned to fight a new kind of war checked their equipment one final time. The Velkari had given them 1 year to prepare for slavery. Instead, humanity had spent that year preparing for war. And they had learned something important about themselves in the process. When humans were pushed to the edge, when their survival was threatened, they didn't just fight back. They became something their enemies had never seen before. Supreme Commander Ketmaro stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crystal Throne, and smiled. Behind him, 200 of the finest ships in the Velkari fleet moved through space toward the small blue world that the humans called Earth. Each ship carried enough firepower to destroy a city, and the Crystal Throne itself could crack a planet in half. Commander, we're approaching the human system, his lieutenant reported. Our scouts detected no defenses around their world. It appears they have accepted their fate. Ketmaros nodded. This was exactly what he had expected. Every species reacted the same way when they met the Velkari. First shock, then fear, then resignation. The humans had probably spent their year building monuments to their new masters or preparing surrender ceremonies. Open a communication channel to their planet, he ordered. Let's see how well they've prepared for integration. But as the Velkari fleet entered the solar system, something unexpected happened. Space around them suddenly became thick and heavy, like moving through mud instead of vacuum. The ships slowed dramatically and their navigation systems began showing error messages. What's happening to our engines? Ketmaros demanded. Sir, something is interfering with our quantum tunnels, the engineer reported, panic creeping into his voice. We can't jump to light speed. We're trapped here. Before Ketmaros could respond, space around them erupted in violence. Ships appeared from nowhere, emerging from behind asteroids and from the dark side of moons. They were small, fast, and painted black to blend with the darkness of space. All ships, this is Admiral Hyunsu, came a voice over the communications channel. Welcome to our solar system. I hope you enjoy your stay because you're not leaving. The first attack came from the asteroid belt. Hundreds of missiles streaked through space, moving faster than anything the Velkari had seen before. They struck the outer ships of the formation before the aliens could even raise their shields. But these weren't ordinary missiles. They were solid metal projectiles fired from railguns at nearly the speed of light. The Velkari energy shields, designed to deflect laser beams and plasma bolts, might as well have been made of paper. The projectiles punched through the crystalline hulls like bullets through glass. Impossible, Ketmaros shouted as he watched 3 of his ships break apart in seconds. Their weapons are primitive. How are they penetrating our defenses? Sir, they're not using energy weapons, his tactical officer reported. These are physical projectiles moving at relativistic speeds. More attacks came from different directions. Ships hidden behind the moon opened fire with rail plasma weapons that Taemin had designed. Each shot was a piece of superheated metal moving so fast it created its own light trail. When they hit Velkari ships, the results were devastating. Ketmaros tried to organize his fleet, but the humans had studied Velkari tactics for months. Every time he gave an order, human ships appeared and disappeared like ghosts, striking at his command vessels before vanishing back into the darkness. From her position on a hidden base on Mars, Yoonji coordinated the attack. She knew exactly which ships contained the Velkari commanders, and she directed the human forces to target them first. Strike Team 3, hit the large ship with the curved front section, she ordered over the communication system. That's their regional commander. Strike Team 7, target the ship with the bright lights on its hull. That's their chief engineer. One by one, the Velkari command structure began to collapse. As their leaders died, the surviving ships became confused and disorganized. They had been trained to follow orders, not to think for themselves. Bora watched the battle from her command center deep inside an asteroid. The quantum disruptors were working perfectly, keeping the Velkari fleet trapped in the solar system. Every time they tried to escape, their faster-than-light drive simply wouldn't work. How many ships have we lost? Admiral Hyunsu asked over the communication system. 12 destroyed, 8 damaged, came the report from Colonel Jinwoo. Enemy losses are at over 100 ships. They can't adapt to our tactics. The Velkari were discovering something terrible. Their superior technology meant nothing if they couldn't hit their targets. The human ships were too small, too fast, and too unpredictable. They appeared from impossible angles, fired their primitive but effective weapons, and vanished before the aliens could respond. Worse, the humans weren't fighting like any enemy the Velkari had ever faced. There were no great battle lines, no honorable single combat between ships. This was more like being attacked by a swarm of angry insects that appeared and disappeared at will. All ships formed defensive positions around the crystal throne, Ketmaros ordered. We'll make our stand here. But the humans had no intention of allowing a traditional battle. Dr. Haiwan's quantum viruses had been loaded into some of the missiles. And when they hit Velkari ships, they didn't just cause physical damage. They infected the alien computer systems, causing weapons to shut down and life support systems to fail. Sir, our fleet is falling apart, the lieutenant reported. 90 ships destroyed, 40 more disabled. We have to retreat. We can't retreat, Ketmaros screamed. The tunnel drives won't work. That was when the humans revealed their final surprise. The stealth ship Incheon, commanded by Admiral Hyunsu himself, had been slowly approaching the crystal throne for the past hour. It was invisible to Velkari sensors and armed with the most powerful railgun humans had ever built. "This is Admiral Hyun-soo to all human forces," came the announcement, targeting the enemy flagship. "All ships prepare for final assault." The shot from the Incheon's main gun was like a bolt of lightning. The projectile, a solid tungsten rod the size of a telephone pole, struck the crystal throne dead center. The mighty flagship, pride of the Velkari fleet, broke in half like a toy. Supreme Commander Ketmaros survived the impact, but his ship was dying around him. Emergency systems failed one by one as his crew abandoned their posts. Through the cracked windows of his bridge, he could see human ships surrounding the wreckage of his fleet. "Velkari Commander, this is Admiral Hyun-soo," came a voice over the communication system. "Surrender now and your surviving crews will be treated according to the rules of war." Ketmaros looked around his ruined bridge. Of his 200 ships, fewer than 20 were still operational, and most of those were badly damaged. His mighty fleet, which had conquered worlds and destroyed civilizations, had been crushed by creatures he had dismissed as primitives. "How?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "You taught us," Hyun-soo replied. "You gave us a year to learn everything about you. Your weaknesses, your tactics, your psychology. You showed us exactly how to defeat you." The battle was over. The few surviving Velkari ships were captured or destroyed within the next hour. Ketmaros himself was taken prisoner, along with several other commanders and their quantum communication equipment. As the human fleet regrouped, Admiral Hyun-soo stood on the bridge of his ship and looked out at the wreckage floating in space. A year ago, he had been a simple exploration captain, seeking peaceful contact with alien life. Now he was a military commander who had just won humanity's first space battle. "Admiral," Yoonji reported from her station, "we've accessed their communication array. We can monitor their entire empire's communications now." "And, sir?" "They're scared," Hyun-soo nodded. The Velkari had come expecting to find a primitive species ready for slavery. Instead, they had found humans. And humans, when threatened, didn't just defend themselves, they learned. They adapted. They struck back. The war was just beginning. The captured Velkari Supreme Commander Ketmaros sat in his cell aboard the human ship Guardian, staring at the metal walls that surrounded him. For 10,000 years, his people had ruled the galaxy. Now he was a prisoner of creatures he had once considered barely intelligent animals. President Soonja entered the cell, accompanied by Dr. Haiwan and Admiral Hyun-soo. The Velkari commander looked up at them with eyes that still held traces of the arrogance his species was famous for. "We want to make a deal with you," Soonja said, sitting down across from the alien prisoner. "Information in exchange for your life." Ketmaros laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. "You think you've won something, little humans? This was one fleet out of thousands. When the Emperor learns what happened here, he will send armadas that will blot out your sun." "That's what we're counting on," Admiral Hyun-soo replied. "But first we need to know where to find them." The interrogation took weeks, but eventually the Velkari commander gave them what they wanted. Not because he wanted to help, but because Dr. Haiwan had developed drugs that made it impossible for him to lie. They learned the locations of Velkari military bases, the size of their fleets, and most importantly, the rigid command structure that held their empire together. "Every sector has a regional commander," Yoonji explained to the military council as she presented their intelligence findings. "Below them are fleet commanders, then ship captains, then crew. They never act without orders from above. It's been that way for thousands of years." General Jinwoo studied the star maps they had extracted from the Velkari computers. "So if we eliminate their command structure, their forces become useless." "Exactly," Yoonji confirmed. "They're not trained to think for themselves. They're trained to follow orders." President Soonja looked at the data with growing satisfaction. "Then that's our strategy. We hunt down their leaders one by one, until there's nothing left of their empire." The operation was called Nemesis, and it began 6 months after the battle for Earth. Human ships, now equipped with improved Velkari technology, spread out across the galaxy like ghosts in the night. They were faster than anything the aliens had, and they struck without warning. The first target was a Velkari military base in the Centauri sector. Admiral Hyun-soo led the attack personally, commanding a fleet of 50 stealth ships. They approached the base invisible to all sensors, using technology that Bora's team had developed from captured Velkari equipment. Remember, we're not here to occupy territory, Hyun-soo told his captains over the communication system. We destroy their military capability and leave. No prisoners except command staff. No mercy. The attack lasted exactly 17 minutes. The Velkari base, which had stood for 3,000 years, was reduced to floating debris. Every ship, every weapon, every piece of military equipment was destroyed. The regional commander and his staff were captured, along with their communication codes and tactical data. By the time Velkari reinforcements arrived, the human fleet was gone, vanished into the darkness between stars like they had never existed. News of the attack spread through the Velkari Empire like wildfire. For the first time in 10 millennia, someone had successfully attacked a major Velkari installation. The impossible had happened. How many ships did they use? Emperor Gelthanor demanded from his throne world of Velkaran. He was an ancient creature, even by Velkari standards, and had ruled the empire for over 2,000 years. Unknown, Your Majesty, his intelligence advisor reported. They appeared from nowhere and disappeared the same way. Our sensors detected nothing until they were already attacking. And losses? Total. The entire base and its fleet were destroyed. Only a few escape pods survived to tell us what happened. Emperor Gelthanor felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries. Fear. Not for himself, but for his empire. These humans were fighting unlike any enemy he had ever faced. They didn't want territory or tribute. They wanted destruction. The second attack came just days later. This time it was a supply convoy carrying weapons to 3 different star systems. General Jinwoo had planned this assault perfectly, studying Velkari logistics until he knew their supply routes better than they did. The convoy never reached its destination. 40 cargo ships and their escorts simply vanished. The only trace left behind was a message broadcast on all Velkari frequencies. Your empire ends now. Today we take revenge for every species you've enslaved, every world you've destroyed, every life you've ended for sport. We are humanity, and we are coming for all of you. The attacks continued, each one more devastating than the last. Human forces struck at communication centers, cutting off contact between Velkari worlds. They destroyed shipyards, preventing the construction of new fleets. They eliminated training facilities, making it impossible to replace lost soldiers. Bora's engineering teams had perfected the quantum virus technology, turning the Velkari's own computers against them. Entire fleets would suddenly lose power as their own systems shut down. Ships that had served for thousands of years became floating tombs as life support failed and weapons stopped working. We're receiving surrender offers from 12 different sectors, Yoonji reported during one of the military briefings. They want to negotiate. No negotiations, President Sunja replied firmly. They wanted to use our entire species as test subjects for biological weapons. They showed no mercy when they thought we were weak. We show no mercy now that we're strong. Dr. Hyawan had been working on the ultimate weapon, a device that could destabilize stars. It was based on Velkari science but improved by human engineering. The first test was conducted on an empty star system at the edge of Velkari space. The star went nova, its light visible from 100 worlds. The message was clear. Humans could destroy entire solar systems if they chose to. Your Majesty, the Velkari military advisor said as he brought the news to Emperor Gelthanor. They found a way to kill stars. If they use that weapon on populated systems, how many fleets do we have left? The Emperor asked. Less than half of what we started with, and morale is collapsing. Some of our commanders are refusing to engage human forces. They call them the Silent Death. Emperor Gelthanor looked out at the stars from his palace window. Once those stars had represented his domain, worlds that served his empire without question. Now they represented targets for an enemy he couldn't understand or defeat. The humans didn't fight for territory or wealth. They fought for something far more dangerous, complete revenge. They wanted his species eliminated, erased from existence as if they had never been. Gather what's left of our forces, he ordered finally. Bring them all back to Velkaran. If we're going to die, we'll die defending our homeworld. 3 years after the first battle at Earth, the Velkari Empire was in ruins. Hundreds of worlds had gone silent. Thousands of ships had been destroyed. The proud species that had ruled the galaxy was now hiding in their home system, waiting for the end. Admiral Hyun-soo stood on the bridge of his flagship, now called the Nemesis, and looked at the star charts. Red marks showed former Velkari positions. All of them were crossed out now. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're getting reports from scout ships. The remaining Valkyrie fleet is gathering at their homeworld. Looks like they're planning to make their final stand there." Hyun-soo nodded. The hunt was almost over. Soon the species that had threatened humanity would be nothing but a memory, a warning to others about what happened when you threatened the wrong prey. "Set course for Velkaran," he ordered. "It's time to finish this." The Velkaran system was beautiful in its dying days. The homeworld of the Valkyrie Empire glowed like a jewel against the darkness of space, its crystalline cities catching the light of their ancient sun. Around the planet, the last ships of what had once been the galaxy's most powerful fleet formed defensive positions. Emperor Gelthanor stood in his throne room, looking up at the ceiling that showed the stars in real time. Most of those stars had once been his. Now they belonged to the humans or to no one at all. "Your Majesty," his aide whispered, "Admiral Hyun-soo is requesting to speak with you directly." The Emperor nodded slowly. He was tired, ancient even by Valkyrie standards, and ready for this to end. "Put him through." The hologram that appeared showed a human face that Gelthanor had come to know well over the past 3 years. Admiral Hyun-soo looked older too, marked by the weight of the war he had fought. Behind him stood the other humans who had led this campaign. Dr. Haiwan with her terrible weapons, General Jinwoo with his perfect strategies, and Communications Officer Yoonji who had learned to think like a Valkyrie, better than most Valkyrie could. "Emperor," Hyun-soo said, his voice respectful but firm, "this is your final chance. Surrender now and we will allow your people to live. Continue to resist and we will finish what you started." Gelthanor almost laughed. "Allow us to live? As what, slaves? Test subjects? The same fate you promised us for humanity?"
"No," Hyun-soo replied.
"As exiles. You will leave this galaxy and never return. Your ships will be destroyed, your weapons taken, your technology forgotten, but your people will live." For a moment the Emperor considered it. Exile was better than extinction. But then he remembered 10,000 years of Valkyrie pride, 10,000 years of ruling the stars, and he knew that his people would rather die as conquerors than live as beggars. "We reject your offer, human," he said with all the dignity he could manage. "We are Valkyrie. We have ruled this galaxy since before your species discovered fire. We will not crawl away like beaten dogs." Hyun-soo nodded as if he had expected this answer. "Then you've chosen extinction." "I'm sorry it had to end this way." The communication ended and Emperor Gelthanor turned to his military commanders. "How many ships do we have left?" 47 capital ships, 300 smaller vessels," came the reply. "Against 500 human ships, all equipped with our own technology, turned against us. And our ground defenses? Our planetary shields are at full power. Our cities are protected by energy barriers that could stop a meteor storm. Our armies are ready." Gelthanor walked to his window and looked out at the preparations. Valkyrie soldiers, proud and desperate, manned weapons that had protected their world for millennia. In the distance he could see the shield generators that surrounded their cities, glowing like small suns. None of it would matter. The humans had spent 3 years learning every weakness the Valkyrie had. They had turned Valkyrie science against them, used Valkyrie tactics better than the Valkyrie themselves could. They had become the perfect enemy. The battle began at dawn. Human ships appeared at the edge of the system, moving in formations that no Valkyrie military college had ever taught. They spread out like a net, surrounding the planet from every direction. The first attack came from Taemin's strike force. They had loaded their ships with quantum viruses that Dr. Haiwan had designed specifically for Valkyrie planetary defenses. As the missiles hit the shield generators, the protective barriers began to flicker and fail. "Impossible," whispered the Valkyrie defense commander. "Those shields have protected us for 5,000 years." "The humans studied them for 3 years," his aide replied grimly. "They know our defenses better than we do." As the planetary shields collapsed, the human fleet moved closer. But instead of attacking the cities directly, they focused on military targets. Weapon factories exploded in brilliant flashes. Shipyards were reduced to twisted metal. Communication centers went silent one by one. General Jinwoo coordinated the ground assault from his flagship. Human soldiers trained for 3 years in zero-gravity combat, landed on the planet's surface in small groups. They didn't try to hold territory or capture cities. Instead, They struck at command centers and communication hubs before disappearing into the crystal forests that covered much of Velkaran. "They're fighting like ghosts again," reported the Velkari ground commander. "We can't pin them down for a proper battle." Emperor Gelthanor watched the destruction from his palace. Every explosion, every fallen building, every silent communication station was another piece of his empire dying. His people, who had conquered the galaxy, were being systematically eliminated by creatures they had thought were primitives. The space battle was even more one-sided. Velkari ships designed for formal combat between fleets couldn't adapt to human tactics. Admiral Hyunsu's forces struck from all directions at once, using the speed and stealth they had perfected over 3 years of war. Bora's engineering teams had saved their best surprise for last. As the Velkari fleet tried to organize a defense, their own ships began to turn against them. Quantum viruses, hidden in captured Velkari technology and planted years earlier, activated all at once. "Sir, half our fleet has just gone offline," reported the Velkari fleet commander. "Their weapons are firing on our own ships. Their engines are shutting down." "The humans," Gelthanor said quietly. "They planned this from the beginning. Everything we captured from them, every piece of technology we studied, was a trap." The battle lasted 18 hours. When it ended, the Velkari fleet was gone. The planetary defenses were destroyed. The great cities of Velkaran were dark and silent, but the humans weren't finished. Dr. Hyawan's greatest weapon was still unused. The Starkiller, the device that could make suns explode, was loaded aboard a single small ship piloted by a volunteer crew. "Are you sure about this?" Admiral Hyunsu asked Dr. Hyawan as they watched the weapon being prepared. "It's the only way to be certain," she replied. "As long as their homeworld exists, other species will remember them as conquerors. This way, they'll be remembered as a warning." Emperor Gelthanor was given one final chance to speak. The humans brought him aboard their flagship and allowed him to address his surviving people. "My subjects," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of defeat. "We are the last. Our empire, which lasted 10,000 years, ends today. We failed not because the humans were stronger, but because we were too proud to learn. Remember this if any survive to remember. Never mistake exploration for weakness and never threaten a species capable of becoming whatever they need to be to survive." The execution was swift. Emperor Gelthanor died fighting Admiral Hyunsu in single combat, as was the Velkari tradition. It was the first time in 3 years that they had fought by someone else's rules, and it was the last. The Starkiller activated at precisely noon, Velkaran time. The sun that had warmed the Velkari homeworld for billions of years suddenly grew brighter, then brighter still. Within minutes, it had become a supernova, its light visible from half the galaxy. When the explosion faded, there was nothing left. No planet, no cities, no trace that the Velkari Empire had ever existed. The species that had ruled the galaxy for 10 millennia was gone, erased from existence as completely as if they had never been born. Years later, Ambassador Yunji met with representatives from other alien species at a space station built in neutral territory. The meeting was supposed to discuss trade agreements and peaceful cooperation, but she could see the fear in their eyes. "We want you to know," said the representative from the Thraxian Republic, "that we have no aggressive intentions toward humanity. We seek only peaceful coexistence." Yunji smiled, but it wasn't a particularly warm smile. "That's good to hear. We prefer peace as well. It's much more efficient than war." The other aliens looked at each other nervously. They had all heard the stories about what happened to species that threatened humanity. The Velkari had been the strongest, the most advanced, the most feared civilization in the galaxy. And humans had wiped them out so completely that most young aliens didn't even know they had ever existed. "We were wondering," the Thraxian continued carefully, "what humanity's intentions are for the rest of the galaxy." "Simple," Yunji replied. "We want to explore, to learn, to meet new friends among the stars. The same thing we wanted when we first left Earth 5 years ago." She paused, letting her words sink in. "But if anyone threatens us the way the Velkari did, if anyone tries to enslave us or use us as test subjects, they'll discover what the Velkari learned too late. Humans aren't predators. We're something much worse. We're survivors, and survivors, by definition, are the ones left standing when everything else is gone." The meeting ended quickly after that. As the alien representatives hurried back to their ships, Yunji looked out at the stars and remembered Captain Hyunsu's first journey into space. They had gone looking for friends and found masters who wanted to make them slaves. Now humanity was the most feared species in the galaxy, not because they conquered worlds or demanded tribute, but because they had proven something terrifying. When humans were pushed to the edge, they didn't just push back, they eliminated the threat completely.